Somewhere in a cave, 30,000 years ago, a woman is in labor, and everyone in the group already knows what she doesn't say out loud. This might not end the way it's supposed to. There's no midwife with medical training, no clean instruments, no way to stop bleeding that won't stop. There's only the people who love her, doing the one thing that it turns out may have shaped the entire human species. They don't leave her alone. Because here's something almost nobody knows about human birth. Of all the species on Earth, we are one of the very few where a mother giving birth alone is genuinely, statistically dangerous, not just uncomfortable. Dangerous, and the reason traces back to a trade-off our ancestors made hundreds of thousands of years ago. One that still shapes what your body does the moment things get hard. To understand why, you have to understand two things our ancestors did that should never have been compatible. They started walking upright, and their brains started getting bigger. Walking upright narrowed the pelvis. A narrower pelvis is more efficient for a two-legged stride, but a bigger brain needs a bigger skull to be born through that same narrower opening. Biological anthropologists call this collision the obstetrical dilemma, a term coined by anthropologist Sherwood Washburn in 1960 to describe exactly this contradiction. The same evolutionary pressures that gave us upright walking and a larger brain also gave us one of the tightest, most dangerous birth canals of any primate on Earth. Evolution found a workaround, but it's a brutal one. Human babies are born dramatically underdeveloped compared to other primates, helpless, unable to hold up their own heads, unable to do much of anything, because if they stayed in the womb any longer until their skulls were fully grown, they'd become too large to be born at all. We essentially trade a dangerously difficult birth for a catastrophically vulnerable infant because the alternative was worse. So what did that trade-off actually cost? Paleodemographic studies and records from pre-modern populations paint a brutal picture. Historians and anthropologists studying maternal mortality before modern medicine estimate that a woman's lifetime risk of dying in childbirth, across all the births she might have, could run as high as 1 in 10, sometimes higher, in populations without medical intervention. Not one bad day. A standing, lifelong risk every single time. And it didn't end at birth. Studies of pre-modern and hunter-gatherer child mortality consistently find that a staggering proportion of children, commonly estimated between 1/4 and 1/2, depending on the population and era, didn't survive to their 5th birthday. Think about what that actually means. If you are alive right now, reading this, you are not just descended from survivors of famine, predators, and ice ages. You are descended, generation after generation, unbroken, from women who survived one of the most dangerous events a human body can go through, and from infants who made it through years most others in their same cohort did not. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, because human birth has one more oddity that almost no other species shares. In most primates, a mother gives birth alone, reaches down, and guides her own baby out, because the baby is typically oriented facing her. Human babies are usually born facing away from the mother, which makes it awkward and often physically difficult for a woman to safely receive, clear, and support her own newborn without help. Biological anthropologist Wenda Trevethan proposed what's become known as the midwife hypothesis, the idea that this specific anatomical quirk may have made some form of assistance during birth not just helpful, but functionally necessary for hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. If she's right, humans may be one of the only species on Earth that essentially evolved to need companionship at the single most physically vulnerable moment of our lives. Not convenience, not comfort, a biological need for another person to be present when things get hardest. Here's where this stops being a story about childbirth. If Trevethan's hypothesis is right, the instinct to not want to face your most vulnerable moments alone isn't a personality trait or a modern emotional weakness. It's older than agriculture, older than language as we know it, possibly one of the oldest cooperative behaviors our species ever developed, because the earliest version of it may have kept mothers and infants alive long enough to become your ancestors. That's why isolation during a genuine crisis feels different from ordinary loneliness. It's not just sadness. Something in you registers it as danger, the same way your ancestors' bodies did in that cave, because for most of human history, going through the hardest moment alone very often meant you didn't survive it. Modern life tells us the opposite. It tells us to be self-sufficient, to handle our hardest moments privately, to not burden anyone. But your biology was never actually built for that. The instinct to reach for someone else exactly when things fall apart isn't weakness. It's very possibly the oldest, most tested survival strategy your species has ever had. The mammoths are gone. The predators are gone. But the single most dangerous moment in an ancient human's life wasn't a hunt or a winter. It was being born and giving birth, and neither one was ever meant to happen alone. You are here because, generation after generation, someone stayed. That instinct is still running in you. The only question is whether you still trust it the next time something in your life feels like it's breaking, and every part of you wants to face it by yourself. You don't have to, because you are descended from the ones who stayed.